I would say I buy on average, and this will floor folks because of how much I talk about it. On average, I buy one latte a day. So maybe 1.25 because there are days where I go and have two. $7-8, $2,000-3,000 a year maybe.
Nice.
Welcome to the Matt Report, the #1 WordPress business podcast. This isn't geek speak. It's about the journey of success and failure as a WordPress entrepreneur. Get ready. You're just an episode away from your next aha experience or big idea. And now your host, Matt.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Matt Report, episode 54. If this is your first time tuning into the Matt Report, what the heck have you been doing? This is the #1 WordPress business podcast on the web, and what I do is I invite folks who run other successful WordPress businesses. Sometimes they're just starting out, and they share their story with us so that we can learn how to build our WordPress business just a little bit better and learn from sort of their success and, more importantly, some of their failures that they've had over the years. MattReport.com, MattReport.com/subscribe. Join the mailing list. Loving the 5-star reviews that I'm getting over on iTunes. I'd really appreciate it if you left me one. The sort of latest comes from Tiny Now. If you work on the web, especially in WordPress, this is a great podcast. Matt guides the conversation towards topics that you can actually derive some action steps and wisdom from. So Tiny Now, thanks for that 5-star review, and thanks to anybody else who's heading over there now to leave me 5 stars. This is an amazing episode today. I have Brian Gardner of StudioPress, also known as Copyblogger, also known as Genesis, also known as the most powerful WordPress framework on the face of the earth. And he joins us today to talk about his business and even more importantly, how he stays on track as sort of the entrepreneur who kind of stumbled upon this sort of success. This wasn't something he sort of set out to do. He wasn't like starting a theme shop one day and be like, you know what, I'm going to have the largest theme shop on the planet. I'm going to employ over 30 folks and sort of merge with a marketing powerhouse. This is something that sort of happened over time, and he's going to share his story of how he keeps that all on track, dealing with people, dealing with growing product, and what inspires him to keep designing day to day. For those of you that follow Brian, you know that this guy is constantly changing his theme on his site and constantly coming up with new themes, and it's great to see, and we're going to find out how he does that. If you tuned in to episode 53, you know that I'm kind of ramping up for a Matt Report Pro version. Don't know what it's going to entail yet. Something with some very good value, some good substance, and some depth. Interaction, community-based membership stuff. Stuff is still yet to be defined, so I'd love to hear sort of your advice on what you would pay for on a Matt Report Pro. We are all used to these internet marketers out there, and I know this is one piece of the puzzle as to why I started this podcast, and it's not going to be your typical, buy my ebook or, sign up for 12-step videos to massive success. I want to connect folks. I want to bring some really good value, particularly in the WordPress space, because this is what the show is all about. It's not just like these other internet marketers out there who are looking at WordPress as some kind of free throwaway tool. You should know by now, if you've been listening for at least the last few episodes, that we all take WordPress serious because it helps put food on the table, and I want to help bring that experience up a little bit more for you. So stay tuned for that, and love a 5-star review, and join the mailing list, mattreport.com/subscribe, and you'll know when that all is ready to come out. Without further ado, let's talk to Brian Gardner. Hey everybody, back with another awesome Matt Report, and I'm finally sitting down with one of the folks who I have revered throughout my WordPress career, ever since I saw Brian on Mixergy, which is, I don't even know how many years ago you were on that show, Brian, but Brian Gardner, Chief Product Officer at Copyblogger, founder of StudioPress. Brian, welcome to the program.
Hey, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for being gracious enough after me punting you for weeks and weeks and weeks and trying to find a time to just sit down and do it. So I'm very happy to be on the show finally.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you should have been my first target for the Matt Report, and it shouldn't have been Brian Clark. I don't know why I put him in front of you. But I do apologize for that.
Yeah, we won't let him hear that part.
Maybe the not trifecta, because now that you're the fourth, but I had Brian, I had Rafal, Andrew Rennick on the show. So completing the full circle of Copyblogger StudioPress. So tremendous to finally sit down with you. Let's talk about why you decided to do WordPress themes. I don't want to spend too much time because I'm assuming a lot of folks have already heard this, but what got you into doing WordPress themes, and how did that spark StudioPress?
Yeah, the full story behind that, you can, for those listening, can Google Brian Gardner, Mixergy, Andrew Warner, and I should probably come up. That's kind of the full story behind, the quote unquote revolution of my business and WordPress themes and all that. The short story is 6, 7, 8 years ago, however long it's been, I was bored at work. I started blogging. Someone said WordPress. I went inside, didn't like the theme, started playing with it. Thought it might be fun to get a name out. Threw up some free themes. People downloaded them. They came back to me and asked if they could pay me to customize them. I started moonlighting. Then I created a theme for a real estate agent that was more website looking than bloggy, and he didn't need that much of a shift, so he rejected it. I designed something. He became happy. I took that theme and asked if anybody would buy it. Sold $10,000 the first month, 20 the second, 40 the third. Told my wife I need to quit. She obliged. 3 months later, she quit. StudioPress formed. Fast forward a couple years, Brian Clark called, merged with Copyblogger, and here we are.
Tremendous. All that said, and all that time passed, the loaded question is, can that same thing happen today? Can a young WordPress entrepreneur walk out of his day job and start a theme shop and scale it to the growth that you have?
In a quick sentence, I say no. To elaborate, the theme shop person needs to start the theme shop before they walk out on their day job, because if there's going to be any degree of success, it needs to be built over time. So much has changed since I started 5, 6, 7 years ago. Quite honestly, and this is kind of the answer I usually give when people, talk about the success and all that, is that it wasn't necessarily that I was good or great at what I was doing, is that I was one of the first, if not the first, to be there, and from there, things just went. So if anything, if you're listening, the take-home message might not necessarily be anything that goes forward here, but is don't necessarily follow the market, be the first to the market. Because that's for me, for me, it was an opportunity. No one was there. I started it. Everyone jumped on board. And from there, everyone just kind of, started doing things. In terms of answering your question, I really don't know if, a lot of people start, there's hundreds or even thousands of, individual designers or developers selling themes through ThemeForest or this or that. Is it a full-time job selling themes? It can be. I think right now, in order to break through and be really, really successful, you need to, align yourself strategically with people, power players, blogger types that everyone knows that might help, kind of catapult you in front of the major market. Otherwise, you're just one of hundreds or thousands of just theme guys. And, I think today's a much different game than it was 7 years ago.
Tremendous. What do you think what is that beef, instead of trying to be first or doing something differently? Does it boil down to as simply like, hey, be the best theme shop that serves bakeries or cupcake people? Is it something as simple as that, or is it, Matt, this market is so saturated, you really have to be a juggernaut to really succeed in this? Is there some kind of throwaway secret sauce that you can share with folks that maybe Copyblogger's not going to go after?
You see, here's the thing, and I'll use a quick analogy before I answer the question. Some of our best design themes are the ones that sell the least. And some of our themes that are the worst design themes, at least in my opinion, sell the most. And what that tells me is that not always is the best on top. It's where the opportunity is it's where the audience or the market is. So in other words, I may design some frilly doily, beautiful looking, women's theme, but if no one's there to buy it, it's not going to do anything. Now, the corporate / enterprise market, that's where a ton of our audience is, and there's more opportunity. So kind of where I'm going with that answer is, you may be the best designer in the world, but if you may create the best looking WordPress theme, but if there's no one to see it and there's no traction you can put behind it, it's going nowhere. Now, in terms of the juggernaut kind of theory, and I'll pitch this just in concept, then say you got to do it on Genesis. Nowadays, with the market kind of already established, what's my suggestion to kind of the struggling designer or the designer in waiting or whatever is, instead of trying to recreate the wheel and do your own thing and create something that most likely gets lost in the shuffle, is if you're a smaller fish, swim with the bigger fish. As an example, lots of people are building child themes now, that go on top of Genesis, and they're great little theme shops like Themedy and Abfinite are coming up, and they sell themes specifically built for Genesis, and there's a far greater audience because we are already out in front of that audience, and all we have to do is tweet or send a link or mention something in an email saying, hey, check out this, and that person has kind of an automatic marketing system in place. They just have to do their thing, which is develop their theme, support it, and we absolutely love to promote other people's stuff, even if that means not buying our own at times. It's like this coming next week, I think we're going to do a theme link showcase where we have a post where we, spotlight 5 themes that are being sold in the community, not on StudioPress. And so, there's just a good example, of building on top of another platform with a built-in audience kind of helps get you ahead.
True. Very true. And I've seen you tweet this out before, or maybe it was a blog post about how, you were amazed where you did this design and the design didn't matter, but then you changed the name and all of a sudden it started selling, and you're just scratching your head like, man, I just put, hours upon hours into this theme and I just called it something else. And now all of a sudden it's selling. Like, what's the deal? Right. Which makes me wonder, who is the audience? And maybe it's different for StudioPress, but I'd imagine that the main audience are folks like you and I who are doing WordPress stuff, and we're like, okay, we need to get a theme StudioPress or, Theme Forest, that kind of thing. Or is it really the end user, the real estate agent, the business owner? Are they coming and knocking on the door? Who is it?
It's kind of a diversity in audience. I mean, there's so many different types of audience. For the most part, I try to design themes that are relatively kind of niche agnostic, and just design something that any person can go into. 1140 is probably a good example of something like that, or even the 16.9 theme. It's not necessarily a theme that's designed for real estate agents or fashion models or whatever. But, for me, it's always about designing something that anybody could envision themselves moving into. A house is a good example. When people want to go buy a house, if you go into a very, very customized and decorated for a very particular motif, you kind of instantly turn off some people by saying, well, I'm not exactly a fan of purple walls. And so, when you sell a house, typically, neutrals and bright colors, aren't anything, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but, and so anyway, with themes, that's sort of kind of the approach I take, which is, sure, we name them themes like executive and enterprise and corporate and stuff like that, because at some point we have to pick a name. Mm-hmm. But something like 16.9 or 1140, there's a story behind it. And I find that people actually resonated with that. 1140 was just kind of an afterthought theme that I had used on my own site. And I didn't even name it 1140 when I was using it. And I'm like, all right, well, I got to come up with a name. What should I call it? And I thought to myself, let's just not call it, the blog theme or something kind of whatever. Let's call it something where people may actually wonder what it is, what's the meaning behind it. So 1140 was a perfect example. It stands for the pixel width of the theme, 1140 pixels wide, and 16.9 is kind of the same thing. There's almost like a mystery around it. So sometimes that can spark interest.
So that's an interesting point. Do you think that these stories are helping sell the theme? And could that be a piece of advice to maybe the up and coming designer who maybe traveled the world and then all of a sudden was inspired by traveling the world to create this next theme? Should they do a video, write a ebook or a book or a journal of their experiences building this theme? Is that something that's a good tip?
It could be. I don't want to go overboard by saying, call it, some word that people can't even pronounce. But I think in a market of themes that are called corporate and very generally used words, I think it helps. I don't think it's necessarily what sells it or makes it successful. But, I think kind of stepping outside the box a bit from time to time is just generally a good business practice.
Nice. So where do you get the inspiration from for all of these designs? I mean, you are probably most famously known, aside from Starbucks, about changing your website, maybe 18 to 20 times a year, something like that.
I don't think it's that many, but
where do you get your inspiration from? And then how do you deploy that? I see that you start with your own website and kind of start from there. Is that sort of the workflow?
Yeah, I find myself online a lot at night and on the weekends, just kind of dumbing around, just trying to not do work. But in essence, it all comes back to work because I'll, read interesting blogs or visit CSS galleries and just kind of, look and see what's new out there in the, the world, and just different creative ways to display information and content, knowing that with Genesis, pretty much anything is possible. And so, typically what I'll do is, after it's been a few weeks or a month or two on my own design, I usually have a tendency to get bored. And I just tweeted 10 minutes ago that the design natives are restless, which ultimately means that the next evening I have free, I'm going to probably stumble across some site that just instantly gives me an idea or something that I typically just run with. And then I'll evolve that on my own site, kind of see how the audience there responds. And 9 times out of 10 themes that I use on my site ultimately make their way over to StudioPress, 1140 being an example, 16.9, Metro, Minimum, and of those 4 themes, I think they make up the top 6 or 7 of our most popular themes. So usually that's kind of a built-in, like a slam dunk theme by the time it gets there. So,
are you looking to any other theme designers out there that are doing things really well that you're inspired by?
Theme shops and theme designers, I generally try to avoid, primarily because I'm afraid I'm going to find something I like and then try to recreate it and be seen as a copycat. And so I kind of purposely I know what people are, building and designing, but I don't spend too much time because, I don't want to get that too inspired by label, so I typically try to avoid that. So Rafal, our lead designer, Copyblogger, just came out with this new site design, which, of course, when I saw it, made me want to just close down my site and come up with something new. But him and I chat a lot, as I do with Lauren Mankey, who's our new designer. A few months ago, we hired her. Really, really good to have them around. We just kind of, chat and drop links to sites of interesting things we see and kind of talk about, how that might apply towards our audience, and can we build a theme around an idea or concept? And typically we do.
So the person listening to this, they hear sort of a quick brief how you started. Everything was good. You were one of the early ones to the game, if not the first to the game, to kind of really do this theme shop as we know it today. So most theme folks or theme designers out there, they're like that typical freelance kind of thing, spend their times at the Starbucks and kind of travel to WordCamp, and they're living a comfortable life. But, Brian Gardner is theme shop owner into chief product officer. What was that sort of process like? Like, you go from somebody who is now, just making some themes to, wow, I have like this global company of over 20 employees. Sort of what's that like to kind of make that transition?
It's been a good and bad thing. Not bad from a business perspective, but just in terms of me and the struggles I've had, kind of because my role has changed significantly over the last 3 years when I merged with Copyblogger. I was, running the show and made all of the decisions at StudioPress, and anything I wanted to do, good or bad, I did. And they weren't always the best decisions, and and did I fail on a number of occasions with the number of decisions because there was no accountability or some other, intelligence kind of to help keep me in check? Not so much. So I've been very welcome to the fact that, we are now a company of 40-ish individuals. There's 5 partners on our team, which means, responsibilities and delegations now take place. And so for me, there were elements of the business that I absolutely did not enjoy, kind of the accounting parts of it, some of the support stuff. As much as I love to help people and do things, it's really difficult to support on top of develop. So there a lot of the things that I didn't like about what I was doing, I was able to, offload onto, other team members and other managers within our company. And that's been an absolutely wonderful experience, because what it's kind of opened me up to do now, which is kind of on a day-to-day basis, I get to strategize, I get to manage people, and I still get to do a lot of design and writing on my blog, which has become a personal thing, as well as writing for StudioPress, the StudioPress blog, and the documentation, and kind of teaching people how to do things. So right now, I'm thrilled to be where I'm at, and I'm very excited about where we're going, and just what my role is within the company.
Do you think StudioPress as StudioPress and Genesis, as a framework, as a theme, as a product, could it have scaled as big as it is now if you didn't merge or join up with Copyblogger and kind of forge that partnership? No,
absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I hired Nathan Rice before the Copyblogger merge, and we had a small support team, many of which are still with us right now. But I think because of the fact that I have a tendency to be tunnel visioned at times, I think at some point, and maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit here, but at some point I would have stifled growth just because of kind of who I am and how I run things. Having a visionary like Brian Clark and the discernment to do and not do things alongside some of my other partners, Sean, who's our accountant, Sonia, who's one of our chief marketing content strategy, and Tony Clark, who I consider my brother from another mother. I mean, him and I get along so well and think the same way, but he's so many times walked me off a cliff or kept me from jumping from the cliff, just with things ideas I wanted to run with. And, so just kind of having a team of intelligent people and surrounding myself with, if anything, a conscience, the bad devil, good devil thing, one on each shoulder, and saying, hey, that's a dumb idea, don't do that. It's just been really helpful. And obviously the relationships that ultimately StudioPress and I have had that have, resulted from, the association with Copyblogger and Brian Clark, certainly would not have occurred if they were, if I was still on my own. So, and those speak volumes,
Yeah. What I see when I look over the WordPress entrepreneur landscape is tremendous. I see tremendous opportunity with all of these sort of what I'll call freelance product developers, right? There's folks out there doing great themes, great plugins, great services, and if they kind of walk the path of partnering up like you did with Copyblogger, things could be greater. But I'm sure there's many factors at play, but one of them is probably fear. Did you have a fear when you were kind of signing on the dotted line? Like, will this really work? Was there any fear, or were you just like gung ho and say this is going to be great?
I wouldn't say it was fear. If anything, and I've admitted this and will still admit this to my partner team, if anything, the fear was not signing on. What happens to me as a smaller fish if for some reason, if I said no and Brian Clark decided to, come together with another theme shop, and what would that do to my company at that point? So, part of my decision to jump into the Copyblogger family and form this, very small part, but a lot of it was if anything, a defensive move. And I've never denied that. I think it's good business to sometimes be aware of the decisions you make as an individual, and that was one of them. In terms of moving forward, the stability that the other 4 partners brought to the company, it was like, felt like as part of a family. It was not me on an island trying to, make choices and decisions on my own, because I, quite honestly, had a lack of a business background. So, a lot of times I was unsure of what I was doing, and it would just be trial and error. And so, to have the structure, and Tony, one of our partners, is huge with process and structure and, formulating things. And, as a person who's sometimes resistant to that, I've over the years now have really embraced the idea of that and understand why that's a great thing and how it builds successful companies. So, no fear. Looking back 3 years, almost just over 3 years to the date when we merged, would not have changed anything at all.
Tremendous. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And you are someone who is not afraid to sort of wear their heart on their sleeve, especially with some of the blogging stuff that you've been doing lately. I know that, I've been following your blog for quite some time. I remember when you were going to launch the Digital Nomad, and we kind of chatted about what that project was going to be like. So what is up with that? What is up with your sort of new blogging mantra, and how does that kind of all work into the day-to-day for Brian Gardner?
So as I alluded to earlier, the ability to write for me is huge, because I had been doing so much, in the early days of when we formed the company, still doing a lot of the design and development before we hired Lauren. Rafal was kind of doing some things, and I was doing a lot of stuff that as a partner I probably shouldn't have been doing. And that was just opportunities for us as a company to hire the people who we needed to hire. I love writing. I've always loved writing and being creative, and it was part of my life that had been missing. As kind of the latter StudioPress days on my own, and as we merged into Copyblogger, things were so busy. We had so many things to do. I kind of felt like I was lacking, and so I started to publish content on my blog. But because I'm such a scatterbrain, part of it was business, part of it was personal, and so I started sending mixed signals to my audience. People who would sign up for WordPress would start hearing about, things that were going on in the personal life. And at the time, I guess I was kind of just polluted with the idea of numbers, which was just get as many numbers to your site, write things for search engines, write things to people will link to. And I kind of went through a phase where I was like, what am I doing this for? What benefit does writing about Genesis or how-tos on my own site, how does that benefit the company? It kind of does, because ultimately I get search traffic and then they go from my site to StudioPress, but it kind of just felt like I was a middleman at that point. And a lot of people were leaving comments about support, and it really was just kind of an experience that just wasn't optimal, most importantly for the user, much less for me. And so a few months ago I said, I'm going to draw a line in the sand and focus and channel my what I'll call business writing, for things like StudioPress and maybe once in a while Copyblogger, because that's where they rightfully belong. That's where the audience is. That's where more eyes will see stuff. And because I kind of want to, kind of trim out, I wouldn't call it the fat, but, hone in on the personal interest on my blog, because that's where, in my opinion, I want to have the audience who cares about things that I may write personally, just as an entrepreneur, as a father, a husband, somebody struggling in life, because trust me, we're all struggling. So a few months ago, I drew a line in the sand. I started taking all of the business and WordPress and Genesis content from my site, and we've repurposed it over on StudioPress, and I've completely removed it from my site. Which has probably cut traffic at least in half, if not more. But I'm okay with that. I've been able to kind of, embrace that. Those who unfollow, those who no longer show up on my site, because again, at this point, the site is just a personal hobby for me. But what I've enjoyed though is the interaction. A lot of people on the in the online space and social media who follow me are entrepreneurs, are developers, designers, people kind of walk in the same things. And so my personal blog for me right now is all about trying to speak truth and be transparent about my experiences, because I think we sugarcoat life way too much. I've got a post on my blog about hating Instagram and the ability to kind of stage how people perceive us, and and of course I fall myself victim to that more than I would like to admit, but to be intentional about just saying, hey man, sometimes life sucks and here's why. And it's amazing the amount of people who've resonated, and I call it kind of crawling out of the woodwork, because like the Me Too people, I mean, there's so many people who agree, and just they're looking for someone maybe that they look up to admit that, hey, life isn't always just flowers and whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it is like a therapeutic session, much like going out for a run, a 3-mile, 5-mile run, whatever, to be able to just put your thoughts up there and simply not care. We kind of joke all the time on Twitter, like, oh, we're going to get some more unsubscribes because of what I'm putting out today, but so what? Because there's going to be somebody else coming in that sort of resonates with our content, which is tremendous, and a big fan of that model. To sort of wrap up the more formal interview, what's sort of the number one challenge for a Copyblogger and your team right now that sort of you're facing going into 2014?
I think personally, and as a company, I think focus is, as a bigger company, focus is always more important. Focus and efficiency. We're pitched with so many ideas. There's 40 of us, that work at the company, all of which have their own ideas, and we have such access to even to follow through with some of these ideas. But we can't all run off and do 100 different things. Like we really have to, and we're coming together and next month as a company to sit down and talk about stuff and kind of to realign and recalibrate and just say, hey, these are the few things that we're working on next year. We need to just come together as a team and move towards them. Because if you're not focused, you're not efficient. And there's far too many ways to, burn, spin your wheels and burn time and not produce. And ultimately in the end, we're a company running a business and need to make money. And, if we're all off kind of goofing around and not doing what we're supposed to or not optimally performing, then we're not as successful as we could be. So I think kind of the focus and the efficiency for us right now, as we, head towards not a ton of major changes, but just restructuring of the way we're doing some things and whatnot. So if we just need to stay the course.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm a team of 5, and focus is definitely the number one thing we're tackling now. I can only imagine what it's like to be a distributed company like yourself and 40 plus employees. Yeah, definitely getting that focus is the challenge. Let's move into the last 2 segments. The first segment, what's in your toolbox? You said that you've been a little bit of a scatterbrain, got all kinds of ideas going around. So what do you use for like an app or piece of software, or maybe even hardware, like a Moleskine notebook, something like that kind of keeps everything together? What is it you use day to day to keep you going?
See, I don't use it, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't actually use a notebook, a Sketchpad, Evernote. I don't use anything to put my thoughts down. I usually, because I'm so accessible to the computer pretty much any time of day, if I ever come up with some idea, whether it's a design idea for a theme or whatever, I just open something up and start doing it rather than write down ideas. I think that one day I'll do a theme about X. I just grab the sample child theme, and I'm notorious for having a demo site up in 5 minutes with already something that looks like where I'm headed. So and because that's a majority of what I do, strategizing about potential design ideas and things like that, it's usually something that I can knock out right away. Thankfully, I don't have to cover a lot of parts of the company that are more or less inclined to be as accessible to just following through. So I don't typically organize. I mean, once in a while, I've actually, we'll write a few things down and be like, well, I can't forget this because I just can't. But so from an organization standpoint, I'm very unorganized.
Awesome. Let's jump into the lightning round. I'll ask you a series of quick questions, and you'll have a series of quick answers. What's the one plugin you cannot live without?
Oh, that's a tough one because I don't use many plugins, if at all. Let me just open up I know it's a lightning round. I don't know if I could probably live without all of them, but I don't have an answer to that question.
Awesome. Well, you are the first 54 episodes in. A favorite WordPress or business book?
All right, we're going to go 0 for 2 here.
What's a quote you live or run your business by?
A quote maybe you should have sent these to me in advance.
That's the challenge of the lightning round.
Exactly. I don't even know about that one either.
All right. Number 4, what's the best advice you ever received, business or career-wise?
Stay the course. And it's one that I teach too. Break through the wall and stay the course.
Perfect. Back when you were doing either client work or even today with theme development and design, what's the longest a client project has taken? Or what's a theme you've been working on forever that simply still hasn't shipped yet?
I would probably say, generally speaking, the AgentPress theme is a theme that's always kind of in an evolving status, and there's just so many different ways to move it that I'm always kind of undecided on how far to take it.
And that was one of the first, so we're talking 5+ years at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're on, I don't know, our 3rd or 4th rendition of it, but it was always the one that I could never ship because I was always like, well, what if I did this, or what if they want that? And it was always the one that I was always, afraid to ship without a feature.
If you had to switch to another content management system, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's kind of a tough question because do I answer that from a business perspective, like a StudioPress business perspective, or just like a personal blogging perspective?
Let's go with your blogging perspective.
I haven't done a ton of research on it, but I know my good friend Jason Schuler's got his leaflets and droplets. I don't want to call it CMS, but it's like a maybe small blog, microblogging type platform using Markdown that doesn't have a database. I would probably look into that first.
Nice. Who should I interview next?
Great question. Nathan Rice.
Awesome. And what's the one question I didn't ask you that I should have? I think I know it.
What's the one question does it have anything to do with revenue?
No, because I kind of talked about that with Brian, but I was Brian Clark. I was going to hint at something about Starbucks, like why don't you have a plaque on the wall, or why don't they have a statue of you?
Yeah.
Or actually, you know what? Let's talk about revenue. How much do you spend at Starbucks per year?
I would say I buy on average, and this will floor folks because of how much I talk about it. On average, I buy one latte a day. So maybe 1.25 because there are days where I go and have 2. $7-8, $2,000-$3,000 a year maybe.
Nice. I'd probably spend the same because Starbucks isn't as big as and around the Boston area. It's a lot of Dunkin' Donuts. So, but I do.
But here's what
Starbucks
I'll tell you
coffee.
though. Starbucks is my vice, right? So if you ask somebody how much they spend on cigarettes or alcohol or gambling or anything else, I would say it's way in excess of $2,000 or $3,000 a year. So for me, it's like my hobby, right? I go out and enjoy my $5 Starbucks, which is overpriced for a cup of coffee, but underpriced when you think about it in terms of hobby. So
yeah. All seriousness aside, all seriousness considered, what do you ever look at Starbucks and look at them as a business and say, we should kind of do stuff that they're doing, like branding or packaging, stuff like that?
Well, yeah, like kind of the little Starbucks always kind of has said they don't serve coffee, they serve the experience, right? The ambiance of being at a shop. And what do I personally enjoy? I work once a day at Starbucks, and I love the experience and the ambiance. And so, in a sense, we sort of like to treat our customers and users the same way, whether it's hosting or Scribe or Premise or StudioPress or whatever, right? We don't want it to just be a theme. We want it to be an entire experience of our community, of our support team, of our design philosophy. So, from that perspective, and maybe as hokey as it might sound, we want to serve our users an experience rather than product.
That's awesome. Well, Brian, it's been an awesome interview. I can't thank you for enough about for spending the time with us to chat about who you are, what you do. Where can folks find you on the web to say thanks?
BrianGardner.com.
Awesome. Brian, thanks for doing it, and I'll chat with you next time.
Sounds good, Matt.
So that was episode 54 wrapped up. And what an amazing show. I love talking to Brian. Been friends with him for a while. I've known him since he's sort of started. Always been a fan and one of the very first WordPress entrepreneurs. Hope you liked it. Let me know. Leave a comment. Send me an email, mattreportblog@gmail.com. Whatever it is, reach out and talk to me about this episode. Looking for guest bloggers too. If you're running a WordPress business, you got some tactics to share. You wanna write about your experience running a WordPress business. You priced a product at $20 and you weren't selling, and then you priced it at $50 and all of a sudden it started skyrocketing. I want to hear stories like that, and you are more than welcome to use the mattreport.com blog as your platform. So looking for guest bloggers, shoot me an email, shoot me a contact form. Till next time, mattreport.com/subscribe. Thanks, everybody.
De ce que tu as trahi. Alors partout où tu vas, la peur te poursuit.